Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with concerns Canada is in the second wave of the pandemic. In Quebec, restrictions are ramping up to fight off a surge of COVID-19. In the last 24 hours, new cases in Quebec topped numbers that haven't been seen since late May. That province recorded 462 new cases of COVID-19. There was one death. The hardest hit areas are in the province's most populated centres, Montreal and Quebec City. Health officials raised the alert level there late today, imposing even tougher restrictions to keep people safe. They include limiting private gatherings from 250 people down to just 25. Political leaders have tried to limit gatherings in Ontario too, but that doesn't seem to be working. Just hours after new restrictions and fines were announced in that province, police had to break up an impromptu party that drew in hundreds. Michael Couture reports.
Somehow, this is still happening. Warnings of a second wave, new limits on outdoor gatherings, and threats of stiff fines didn't stop hundreds of car lovers from congregating in Hamilton Saturday night.
Is it worth a $750 fine potentially?
No. No.
Yet there he was. Perhaps he was laughing because Hamilton police did show up, but didn't hand out any tickets.
The actions last night, in light of the concern with COVID-19, are abhorrent. The participants should be ashamed of themselves. And if we can identify them and we are able to lay charges down the road, we will certainly be doing that.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't pull any punches, saying in a statement, quote, "The reckless behavior that we saw in Ancaster last night was totally unacceptable." And it came just hours after Ontario announced stricter limits on outdoor and indoor gatherings. Cities across Quebec have increased police patrols to now include bars and restaurants, ensuring health guidelines are being followed. Brampton, Ontario has been just as aggressive, and it's paid off.
We had bylaw out in full force this weekend, but there was only 3 tickets that had to be issued. And I put that in context. Our worst weekend in July, we had to issue 120 tickets.
And if there isn't more of that, we could see more of this. Thousands of cars snaked around the home of the Ottawa Senators to get tested for COVID-19 at this pop-up facility. Dozens of paramedics from across the region came together over the weekend to take some of the pressure off of other testing centers that have been overrun.
Yeah, Brewer Park would have been insane trying to stand in line with him for hours on end.
With a sick child, Jackie Lorette chose to sit in her car for 4 hours instead. And with schools being very strict, she's weighing another difficult decision.
Any symptom they show at school, it's either you get tested or they send us home. Kind of thinking of switching them to homeschooling.
Some say health officials should have anticipated increased demand for testing as students went back to school. Those on the front lines contend they're trying to be as nimble as possible.
The speed at which the hospitals, our paramedic partners, and the community have adjusted, we're doing the best that we can with the amount of resources that we have to work with.
But more may be needed as the province and the country brace for the second wave of COVID-19. Michael Couture, Global News, Ottawa.
Cases aren't just on the rise in Ontario and Quebec. Spikes are being seen across the country. Here's the picture from the regions that are reporting today. Manitoba added 29 new cases. Most are in Winnipeg. Saskatchewan saw 20 new cases. And Nunavut has now recorded its first 2 coronavirus cases. Those 2 cases in northern Canada are raising concerns about people who fly in and out of remote communities for work. The 2 people who were infected worked at a gold mine, but acquired the virus at home. As Heather Yerkes-West explains, health experts say it's more important than ever for vulnerable communities to remain vigilant.
Knowing an outbreak could be devastating, careful controls have spared most of Canada's northern communities from the impact of COVID-19.
Some of that's just because of travel patterns, but another major reason is because many of these communities have taken very, very careful steps to prevent the importation of COVID-19.
A government spokesperson says 2 cases recently reported at a Nunavut gold mine pose no risk to the surrounding community. But they do serve as a reminder that as cases across the country rise, work sites filled with a fly-in, fly-out workforce are the perfect breeding ground for the virus. Right now, there are 4 active outbreaks at work camps within Alberta's oil sands.
As long as that kind of heightened awareness is there and prompt action is taken, in response to positive tests or people with symptoms, I don't think that it poses a specific risk to the neighboring communities.
BC, Quebec, and Alberta currently have the highest case counts per capita. But more than 6 months into the pandemic, fatigue is setting in. This Calgary restaurant owner says more and more he's seeing customers unwilling to follow COVID-19 protocols.
Everyone is now starting to see more and more issues every day with people not wearing a mask, refusing to wear masks. When they're asked to wearing masks, it's everything from them walking out to up into grabbing items, throwing them, getting very aggressive, up to the point where near violence is occurring.
And that's a big concern as summer clicks to fall and cold and flu season sets in.
If we all fill our end of the bargain, we can really ensure that that curve doesn't skyrocket. But of course, if there's breakdowns in the system, we're going to see a pretty impressive rise in cases.
A clear reminder of what's at stake for the months ahead. Heather, Urix West Global News, Calgary.